Chapter 24. One day, Maya and Mama and all of the brothers and sisters and other family members came together in a big building and sat quietly while I demonstrated a new trick I'd been taught, which was to walk very slowly down a narrow path between wooden benches, mount some carpeted stairs, and stand patiently while I'll remove something from a small pack I carried on my back. Then everyone sat and admired me while Maya and Al had a conversation. Maya was wearing a big, fluffy outfit, so I knew we weren't going to the park to play afterward, but that was okay because everyone seemed so glad at how well I'd done the trick. Mama even cried. She was so happy. Then we went to Mama's house, and the children ran around and fed me cake. A few months later, we all moved into a different house with a much better backyard. It had a garage too, but thankfully no one suggested that I sleep out there. Al and Maya slept together, and though they didn't mind when I jumped up to be with them, there was frankly no room to get a good night's sleep. And anyway, the cats kept climbing up there too. So I eventually learned to lie on the floor next to Maya's side, where I could get up and follow her if she awoke during the middle of the night and went anywhere. Gradually, I came to understand that we wouldn't be doing work anymore. I could only conclude that we'd found everybody who needed to be found and that Wally and Belinda had lost interest in the whole process. Maya still went running, though, and Al sometimes went with us, though he had trouble keeping up. I was therefore surprised when Maya excitedly loaded me into the truck and took me for a car ride. It felt like we were going to do work, except that Maya's mood was different, less urgent. She took me to a big building and told me it was a school. This was confusing to me, as I had learned that school was something where Ethan went away. It wasn't a place, it was a state of being without the boy. I stuck to Maya's side, though, as we entered a big noisy room filled with children who were all excited and laughing. I sat with Maya and watched the children who were doing their best to sit still. I was reminded of Ethan and Chelsea and the children in our neighborhood, always full of energy. A bright light was in my eyes. A woman spoke, and then all the girls and boys clapped, startling me. I wagged my tail, feeling a collective joy washing off the children. Maya walked me forward, and when she spoke, her voice was very loud, and it seemed to come from both next to me and at the back of the room. This is Ellie. She is a retired search and rescue dog. As part of our outreach program, I wanted to come talk to you about how Ellie has helped find lost children and what you can do if you ever become lost, Maya said. I yawned, wondering what this was all about. After we stood around doing nothing for about half an hour, Maya led me down off the stage, and the children lined up and then came up in small groups to pet me. Some of them hugged me with unabashed affection, and some of them held back, a little afraid. I wagged my tail in reassurance, and one girl put a timid hand out, which I licked. She snatched her hand back, squealing, no longer frightened. Though Maya and I no longer did work, we very often did school. Sometimes the children were little, and sometimes they weren't children at all, but people as old as Grandma and Grandpa. Sometimes Maya and I went to places full of chemical smells and people who were in pain, or feeling sad and sick as they lay in bed, and we would linger with these people until some of their sadness lifted. I could always tell when we were doing school because Maya would take extra time getting dressed in the morning. The days we didn't do school, she dressed hurriedly and sometimes ran out the door with Al chuckling. Then Al would leave too, and I'd be stuck at home with the stupid cats. Though I no longer wore nose cream, Tinkerbell persisted in hanging near me and cuddling up against me when I'd take a nap. I was glad that Al wasn't there to see it. Al had a lot of affection for me, but for the cats, not so much. Tinkerbell hid from Al while Stella only approached him when Al had food. And Emmett would occasionally strut over to Al and loftily rub against him as if putting cat fur in his pants was doing him some kind of favor. We'd been doing school for several years when Maya broke the pattern. We were in a place called class, which was smaller than some of the rooms in which I'd been and which was filled with children who all seemed about the same age. These particular children were very little and sat on the floor on blankets. I was a little envious. Most of my time at home was spent napping, and I didn't seem to have the energy that I'd once had, so I decided that if the children wanted me to lie on a blanket with them, I'd be willing to do so. Maya called forward one of the children, who approached shyly. Her name was Alyssa, and she gave me a hug. When I licked her face, the children laughed, but Maya and I had never done this before. Had a single child come forward, and I wasn't sure what it was about. The woman who sat at the big desk, the teacher, said, Alyssa has never actually met Ellie before, but if it weren't for Ellie, Alyssa would never have been born. Soon all the children were touching me, which was much more typical of how school went. Sometimes the children were a little rough, and at this school a boy pulled sharply on my ears, but I just let him do it. At the end of school, the children raced out the door, but the little girl Alyssa stayed behind, as did the teacher. Maya seemed excited about something, so I waited expectantly, and then a man and a woman came into the classroom, and Alyssa ran to them. The man was Jacob. I bounded over to him. He stooped down, scratching my ears. How are you, Ellie? Look how gray you're getting. The woman picked up Alyssa. Daddy used to work with Ellie. Did you know that? Yes, said Alyssa. Maya hugged Jacob and the woman, who sat who set Alyssa back down so she could pet me some more. I sat and regarded Jacob. He was so different than when I last saw him. The coldness in him seemed to have gone away. The little girl Alyssa, I realized, was his child, and the woman was the girl's mother. Jacob had family now, and he was happy. That's what was different. And all the time I'd known him, Jacob had never once been happy. I'm glad you're doing this community outreach program, Jacob told Maya. A dog like Ellie needs to work. I registered my name in the word work, but there was no sense in the room that we had an urgent need to find. Jacob just always talked about work. That was his way. It was very pleasant to be there with Jacob and feel the love pour out of him when he looked at his family. I eased down onto the floor, so happy I thought I might nap. We've got to get you home, the woman said to Alyssa. Can Ellie come, Alyssa asked. Everyone laughed. Ellie, Jacob said. I sat up. He bent down again, holding my face in his hands. You are a good dog, Ellie, a good dog. The feel of his rough hands on my fur took me back to when I was a puppy, first learning my work. I wagged my tail full of love for this man, yet there was no question that I was happy with Maya. So when we all left each other in the hallway, I unquestioningly followed her, my nails clicking. Good dog, Ellie, Maya murmured. Wasn't it fun to see Jacob? Bye, Ellie, little Alyssa called, her tiny voice echoing in the quiet hall. Maya stopped and turned, so I did too, and my last sight of Jacob was of him picking up his daughter, grinning at me. That year, Emmett and Stella both died. Maya cried and was very sad, and Al was a little sad too. The house seemed empty without them, and Tinkerbell needed constant assurance from me now that she was the only cat. Several times a day I'd awaken from a nap to find her pressed up against me, or even more disconcerting, standing and staring at me. I didn't understand her attachment to me and knew it was not my purpose in life to be the substitute mother for a feline, but I didn't mind it much and even let her lick me sometimes because it seemed to make her happy. The best days were when it rained, which it did infrequently. The smell seemed to leap off the ground the way they did when I was a puppy. I could usually sense when the thickening clouds meant moisture, and remembered how much more often it rained back on the farm. I found myself thinking of the farm much more often now, the farm and Ethan. Though my life with Fast and Sister in the yard with Coco had faded to a distant memory, it seemed that sometimes I awoke with a start and lifted my head, thinking I'd just heard Ethan's car door slam, that he would soon walk in calling my name. One day when rain seemed imminent, Maya and I were doing school in a class with children who sat in chairs instead of on blankets. There was a sudden crack of lightning, and all the children jumped and laughed and then turned to look as a huge storm made the sky black and pounded the building with a roar of rain. I inhaled, wishing they'd open the windows to let in the fragrances. Settle down, class, said the teacher. The door to the classroom suddenly opened and a man and woman came inside, both of them wet. We've lost Jeffrey Hicks, the man said. I picked up the tension in his voice and regarded the two of them alertly. The alarm coming off the two people was familiar, an emotion I'd encountered several times when I was doing work. He's a first grader, the man told Maya. The children all started talking. Quiet, the teacher snapped. They were playing hide and seek when the rain started, the woman said. The storm just came up out of nowhere. 1 minute was fine, the next... She put her hands to her eyes, which were suddenly full of tears. When I had everyone come in, Jeffrey wasn't with them. It was his turn to hide.